Welcome back to another episode of the Max Turn Podcast. Kyle sits here alongside James Finch, and today we get into everyone's favorite topic, offer sheets. Going to talk about the, logistics behind them, the parameters, stuff along those lines. And I think by the time you finish listening to this episode, if you like fun and you like the idea of fun offer sheets, you're going to be disappointed. Because I think what's ultimately going to happen is we're going to come to the conclusion there could be maybe a couple this offseason, maybe, but it's not going to be the same fun necessarily that we saw with St. Louis predatory against Edmonton last year, where that was very strategic and very smart. I think it was smart by
That's
St.
not
Louis.
what I was thinking. I think there could be a little nastiness potentially. But
Well, yes, there could be a little
yes.
retaliatory in that nature, but I don't know. I just
not even just them.
Okay.
I have ideas.
But
yes.
not as many ideas to maybe satisfy the talk that's been out there.
Right. Every year there's a lot of talk, and there's reasons it doesn't come to fruition.
And this year, I think there's the most talk there's ever been because it was used last summer and in that manner.
It was used last summer in that manner. There's teams with tons of money to work with, but that also is potentially a negative towards them.
Anyways, probably should get through the promotional stuff first.
Yes. Go.
Max Turn Podcast available on all major podcast platforms. We appreciate you subscribing and listening. Content, including our contract projections that we'll be referencing in this article, is available on X, Blue Sky, and Threads at AFP Analytics, pin posts. In our link tree, which can be found from our profiles, we also have a tip jar, buy me a coffee. Anyone who has contributed or is thinking of contributing, we do appreciate all contributions. And at the end of the offseason, 10% will be donated to Rochester Emergency Veterinary Services. And I think those are all our promotions that just need to get out. We got to get out of the way, you know. Got to build up those subscriptions on the channel, on the Xverse, whatever. So now we'll get into the fun of the offer sheets. Actually, we'll probably get into the less fun because we need to talk logistics here.
Yeah,
because I think I don't know if I don't want to say that fans are uninformed because I think a lot of fans understand most of the mechanics. But I think we see them so rarely that there aren't enough examples to point to. And I think that the fact that it did happen and now we're starting to talk about it again, everyone who's got an RFA next to their name seemingly is eligible for one, which is mostly true, but there's some nuances and caveats that I think we got to get out of the way first.
Yeah, there's... Yes. So, I guess to start right away, you'll see certain players referred to as RFAs, but they are technically 10.2 Cs. Biggest example this offseason would be Luke Hughes.
Yep.
This is a player that ultimately did not accrue enough time and is specifically not eligible for an offer sheet.
So basically, the first season they played a pro season out of college at the correct age, but didn't play 10 games. I think that's the simplest way to put it. Yeah. 10 regular season plus playoff games.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that, again, that's probably the simplest way. There's some more nuance in there. Not going to go any further than that.
And I guess just quickly for the sake of it. So Hughes, Alex Laferriere,
LA Kings,
Kings, Wyatt Kaiser, Chicago, Mackie Samoskevich with Florida.
Someone had been in our mentions recently asking about that, which I think was an interesting idea, but I had to pour the water on that fire out like instantly and say sorry, that just can't happen.
Yeah.
According to what we researched.
If he wasn't, that would actually be a pretty interesting one
to talk about. Yeah. I'm pretty sure we have all these statuses correct.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time reading the collective bargaining agreement and researching. We had Matthew Knives wrong for a touch, and then realized that he had played playoff games plus regular season to get to 10, had fixed that. So
Yep.
Levi Marilainen, I think, is the last one we have.
Yeah, I didn't scroll that far. Yes. Okay, so there's that. There is, guess we'll talk about arbitration maybe.
Yeah, so if they have 10.2C status, they're technically an RFA. Most cap sites, including where our contract projections are, cap wages, list as RFA, but there is the nuance in there. We've tried in our sheet, in our pin post at AFP Analytics, to denote 10.2C. So those right off the bat are not eligible for an offer sheet. No ifs, ands, no loopholes, no anything. RFA or arbitration next.
So basically, how does arbitration impact an offer sheet? As soon as someone elects for arbitration, they're not eligible for an offer sheet.
As soon as a player elects for arbitration, they are not eligible for an offer sheet. The team, we fact checked this last year.
Okay.
The team can elect for arbitration. They have to elect for arbitration before July 1st. And then the player has until July 5th at 5 p.m. to sign an offer sheet. So there's a window there. Very limited window. But a player can't elect for arbitration until July 1st, and they have until that same deadline to file that election. So what usually happens is if a player elects for arbitration, it coincides with that deadline passing, and it kills any offer sheet possibility. A team can elect, and the player would have basically 5 days from July 1st to July 5th to negotiate an offer sheet. But that's a very limited time frame, and you have to find a taker. You have to find someone who's willing to give you the money, willing to give up the picks, and structure it in a way that would make it unappealing for the other team to match it.
Okay. By the time you are listening to this, I believe you will know if the team has elected arbitration. I believe that is a rule. Is that the one that's like 2 days after the end of the cup final?
That's the buyout window, and I think that's also when the
I think that's
team
when
can start making the elections. So
yeah.
in most cases, if the team's going to make the election, they're probably going to do it right away. So yes, we're recording this one a little bit in advance, so you might be like, oh, that guy already got team elected arbitration or something.
Yeah, so we're recording a day after
Yeah.
the cup final.
Yeah.
So the window's not open as of now. It will be, and it's very possible you hear some players are now going to arbitration. Team
elected. But that does not mean they do have a small window to sign an offer sheet.
Yes, but it could impact in other ways.
Yes.
Impact the overall process, I suppose.
So anyway, I think the big picture here is 25, 20, 24, 25, 26. Not every 24-year-old, but 25 and 26-year-olds are eligible for arbitration. And about half of 24, maybe a little bit under that. I'm just ballparking numbers here. And again, in our sheet that we have up, we have a column that denotes, yes, they're arbitration eligible. So there is, if either side elects for arbitration, the offer sheet goes out the window as of July 5th. I think that's the best way to put this for any player that's arbitration eligible. If they're getting an offer sheet, it has to happen before July 5th.
Beyond arbitration, because I think we can talk about like how arbitration could impact things potentially a little more with some specific examples later in the episode. Beyond arbitration, I think one of the big things that is either not known really or not fully understood is the way compensation is calculated based off of the deal that gets signed. Specifically, I don't know what we would call it or what it is called. I guess the 5-year rule.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So basically, it's not as simple as divide the value of the contract by the years or the term and you get your AAV and then match it up to the compensation tables.
Yeah.
Basically, you need to divide that contract value by 5. Well,
The lesser
I guess the
of-
lesser of the term of the contract or 5.
Correct.
5 years.
Basically, if you're an Excel user or coder or anything, it's a pretty basic if statement
Yes.
where if the term exceeds 5, 5. If not, take the term.
Yep. So for, I guess, the sake of this episode, we are planning to kind of discuss some RFAs using our contract projections. So to pick out an example that this type of calculation would apply to, let's say Noah Dobson, we have projected at 8 years at about 10.25. So again, to calculate the compensation, we're not dividing the total value of the contract by 8. We're dividing it by 5. So the AAV for compensation purposes would be about 16.4 million, which would easily put him into the 4 first-round pick section of compensation.
Otherwise, his projected AAV that you see in our sheet puts him at 2 first, a second, and third. So if you're just matching up the compensation table versus the average annual value we kind of present, you'd be like, oh, 2 first, a second, and a third. Yeah, I'll do that. No, you have to divide the total value by 5. So if he were to get our total value, basically our contract projection, yeah, it's the 4 firsts.
Just really quickly, as an example that doesn't need to change, Gabe Velarde, we've got 4 years, 6.82. That 4 years is below the 5, so we can just divide by the term of the contract.
Yep.
So AAV for compensation purposes is exactly the same, that 6.82.
Yep. And I think the other important thing, so compensation is draft picks.
Yes.
It goes from a third at the lowest end. Actually, it goes from nothing.
Well, yes.
If it's under, I have it. If it's under $1,544,425.
Yep.
And the team decides not to match, you can get the player for free. Then above that threshold, third, 2.3 million. I'm going to start rounding here.
Yep.
A second, 4.68. First and third, 7, a little bit over 7. First, second, and third, 9.36. That's the 2 firsts, the second, and the third. And then 11.7 is 4 firsts. Again, keeping that 5-year kind of term rule in mind here. those draft picks have to be your own. Have to be. And because offer sheets can't be signed until July 1st, the draft picks that your favorite team holds at this draft that's about to happen in LA, they don't matter. They don't matter here. It's 2026 draft is the first one that we look at.
Yep.
So in order to sign an offer sheet, you have to first have a player willing to sign in that deal, whatever is put in front of them. Simultaneously, you have to be able to provide the compensation the minute the ink is dry on that contract or that offer sheet. So you have to have your own picks. So if you, for example, sign someone that the compensation is a first, second, and third, in the 2026 draft, before signing that offer sheet, you have to have your own first, second, and third round pick. And if it's the compensation that spans multiple drafts, it is the immediately following drafts until it is satisfied, basically. So 2 first would be 26, 27, 4 first, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 30. Let me get the fingers out. 6, 7, 8, 9. No, 6, 7, 8, 9.
6, 7, 8, 9.
Had to get the fingers out. If we had videos someday, you would have seen me using the fingers there.
Yeah.
I can also count to 10 too. I think I proved that too.
Well.
Anyways, that I think is the thing. Those two things, I think people understand the needing your own picks a little bit more after what St. Louis did last offseason. The term thing, I think, is still not trying to insult anyone listening by any means, but I think that that's one of those things that flies a little under the radar.
Yes.
So one thing, if over the next week or so, really, I think right after the draft, if someone tries to reacquire their own pick in 2026, my radar's going up.
Yes.
Because the best time to probably reacquire that is going to be at the draft. Because the way that St. Louis had to kind of go about that last summer was kind of awkward.
Yes. I want to say this year, I think there's been some talk about the Rangers needing their second back from Utah in 2026.
I believe that that's correct. Well, the Rangers are interesting because they have the conditional first round to Pittsburgh right now. Well, to Pittsburgh via Vancouver. And I don't know. I haven't seen enough on when they have to declare that. So looking at cap wages right now, they do not have. They show that the Rangers have their own first round pick this year, but not next year. You're correct that the Utah now owns the 2026 second round pick of the Rangers.
Okay.
But the Rangers, I think, still technically could give Pittsburgh this year's first instead of making the pick and keep their first next year. I think in this draft the Rangers should just give up the first. But
okay.
If they do give up the first and also reacquire their second, my antenna is definitely going up.
I believe they have to decide by June 25th.
So a couple days before the first round officially commences.
Yes. I would almost, if that's something they are looking to do, I would almost be on the lookout for a trade between them and Utah first, making sure they get that second before deciding what needs to happen with the first.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny if they decide to give up the first and thinking they're going to do an offer sheet and thinking they can get something done with Utah, and then that falls through. And yeah,
Yep.
that would be pretty funny.
Yep.
So I think that's one of the things to kind of keep an eye on next couple days, if it hasn't already happened. But yeah, that would be, if the Rangers did something like that, that would definitely start some fun and chaos.
Speaking of fun and chaos,
Yeah,
let's talk about the fun and chaos that is unlikely to happen.
sure.
There are a lot of rumors around certain names. And in general, for most of them, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the teams not to match an offer.
Yeah. Do you want to, should we start pouring buckets of water on fires first, or should we allow some fires to keep blazing?
I think we pour some buckets of
Okay.
water on the fires.
Should we start with JJ Peterka?
There's not an offer sheet that Buffalo is, unless you're going into that 4 first range.
Yeah.
Buffalo's going to match.
One other mechanic we probably should have talked about, and this is probably actually a good point to bring it up, is the player has to go to the other team for that exact same compensation. So let's just say the smoke's been around the Rangers offer sheeting Peterka. Let's just say the Rangers go through the efforts to acquire their picks and extend the offer sheet to Peterka. The Sabres say, if the Sabres decide not to match, the Rangers have to send those picks instantly to Buffalo. But the Rangers can sweeten the pot, basically. And we saw this last year, is there can be kind of a conditional deal where the Rangers could trade someone else. Like, let's just say they could trade Keandre Miller in exchange for even some of those picks back or whatever. So mechanic-wise, Peterka would go for the picks. But that doesn't preclude the teams from working out basically a side deal.
Yeah.
To facilitate the offer sheet going through. I think wanted to point that out as well. There's a lot of confusion around that last year. Like, we kept phrasing it as, oh, there can still be an like when Edmonton and when St. Louis did that to Edmonton, we kept saying, well, something else could work out, and not that Edmonton ended up with much more out of it, but they think they did get a few extra pieces to not match that.
Yes.
Anyways, that's kind of the mechanics of how that works. But so Peterka.
In general, you're not signing Peterka to an offer sheet and giving up 2 firsts, a second, and a third.
No.
Buffalo will match that. And yes, sure, you can try and sweeten the pot a little bit, and maybe it ends up working. But in general, the idea of we can offer sheet Peterka, it's very unlikely to simply work like that.
Related to the mechanics here, so Buffalo says, thanks for negotiating the contract for us. Matches. What they cannot do is then go and trade him to, let's just say, Calgary, because there's been connections there. They can't match the offer sheet and then go trade Peterka to Calgary this year. Definitely this offseason. Maybe it's January 1st, but I think it's for a season. Probably should have 100% fact checked, but they can't turn around. I know for a fact they can't turn around this summer. You're going to fact check.
It's not right away.
Yeah, so it's either January 1st or the entire season. You're going to fact check me as usually happens. I start spewing things that I'm pretty sure I'm right on, but
not quickly on this 10-year-old Mac.
Well, So buy me a coffee donations so James can get a MacBook to fact check me quicker on this podcast, or some other laptop, but I shouldn't be promoting products here because they're not a sponsor, so we'll just say laptop. But buy me a coffee on our link tree. It's fun. Let's fund James a new computer to fact check me quicker, so I don't sit here in the middle of a podcast episode promoting our way to monetize ourselves. As you listen to this ad that cuts in the next like 10 seconds, which we may or may not endorse that product. We probably don't endorse that product. Well, we had to pause because we couldn't find the answer in a timely manner while I stalled for time doing self promotions here.
Yeah.
But we do have an answer. Fact checked me. It turns out I didn't really need to be fact checked.
Yeah, it's 1 year from the match.
Yeah.
Matching of the offer sheet.
So, in our example, Rangers extend an offer sheet to Peterka. Buffalo says, thanks for negotiating this contract. We will match it. The minute that happens, Peterka is playing for Buffalo for this upcoming season.
Yep.
They cannot trade him elsewhere. So an offer sheet would... There's been tons of smoke around JJ Peterka's name. An offer sheet would be the most likely scenario for him actually staying in Buffalo. Unless someone wants to get absolutely ridiculous, in which case the Sabres probably take the 4 first-round picks and use those to trade for someone else.
100% agree.
There's one bucket of water on a little fire.
A little bit has been around Marco Rossi, mainly because he's a pretty heavily rumored trade candidate. So there's some speculation an offer sheet could work there.
That one I'm not quite as quick to pour the bucket of water on. If Minnesota truly has reservations about committing term to him, that could be an avenue for a team to acquire him for maybe... I think we have... Yeah, so if he got our projected contract, the compensation cost would be 2 firsts, a second, and a third. I mean, if I'm a team, I'm absolutely fine giving that up for maybe not absolutely, but I think I'm okay giving that up for like a pretty good second line center with still room to grow.
Yeah. I don't know if that happens, at least at our dollar amount there. Just it almost seems like there might be a difference in perception kind of league wide versus what we would think of the player or other more analytically focused people would value the player at.
Yeah. I would put Rossi more likely than Peterka of getting and it being successful. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
The other problem is a lot of teams right now can't even make that offer sheet. So
Also true.
I guess that
again, needing 2 firsts in a row.
So that excludes here. We'll kind of exclude teams here. 2 firsts in a row. Colorado doesn't have a first. Dallas doesn't have a first. Edmonton doesn't have a first. Florida doesn't have a first. I guess. See, the Rangers, depending, we discussed that situation, they could have if they give Pittsburgh their pick this year. Ottawa doesn't have the first. Toronto and Vegas do not have the firsts. So that takes them off. Then you have Buffalo, who doesn't have a second, their own second. You have Columbus, who doesn't have their own second. Minnesota, obviously, they can't offer sheet their own player, but for purposes of this discussion, Minnesota does not have their own second.
So the seconds, in addition to the one already named, Islanders would be ruled out. Um, well, okay, so really not having seconds. This is kind of a confusing way to go through it, I think. But Buffalo doesn't have their own second. Colorado, Columbus, Minnesota, New York Islanders, New York Rangers, Ottawa Senators, St. Louis Blues, Toronto Maple Leafs, and Winnipeg Jets all would not have their own second. That would impact multiple levels of offer sheets here.
Yep. And then not having their own thirds would be Carolina, Colorado, Dallas, Florida, San Jose, Vancouver, and Washington. So
this, well, and that all is kind of a lot of info without many specifics, but I think the important thing to remember there is the different compensation levels. There could, in theory, be an offer sheet where you need your own third round pick, and that's it. You might need your own second. Then we work up to your own first and third round. Then your first, second, and third round pick. Then 2 firsts, 1 second, and 1 third, and ultimately the 4 firsts. So just missing a second round pick takes you out of the 2.3 to 4.7 range. Takes you out of the 7 to 9.3, 9.4 range. Takes you out of the 9.3, 9.4 to 11.7 range. So a lot of teams have trouble with matching up for really a lot of these players.
Yeah. So you already, so some of these level players, just as much fun as they are to talk about, a Peterka, a Rossi, Matthew Knives, moving to another name.
But Knives is not gonna get.
No.
He could get an offer sheet, and maybe he would even sign it, but Toronto is not letting him go.
It's the exact same as Buffalo and Peterka. Is like, thanks for doing this deal for us.
Yep.
Because there's not much of compensation that they're going to say, no, we'd rather have the picks. And then, so those are some of the big names who aren't arbitration eligible. So they can sign an offer sheet all through the summer until an actual deal is done. Really, where we probably see, if there's going to be an offer sheet, it's probably some lower level name. I think one name that you had thrown out a while ago that maybe is a little less likely now, Will Cooley, was someone that would before the Rangers had cleared some space with Kreider, you were pushing the idea of a dual Miller Cooley offer sheet like right on July 1st. That would have been similar to what St. Louis did last year. But Cooley wouldn't be massive compensation. He's only a second? Yeah.
Yeah.
Based on our projection.
Which I guess one thing to note, if teams want to be successful, it might make sense to go above our projection for some players, especially if you were to target a player of that level.
You probably go right to the top without moving up to the next tier of compensations. Would be the way that I would approach it if I were okay. So if the market value for Gabe Vilardi maybe would be a good one here. Actually, he's almost right. He is almost pushing, but we haven't projected 6.8 million. You maybe push it up to 7 million just to make sure you get him.
Yep.
Make it a little bit more uncomfortable. That wasn't a great example because he's basically at the top of that limit, but
even using Will Cooley, we had 3 by 3.4. If you could push that 3.4 to 4.6, you're right at the top of the second round. If you're willing to even do a little more than that, maybe you make it a 5-year deal and you go up to the next range and maybe you go 5.5 mil, 5 years.
At that point, the Rangers are probably taking the first and the third. To be honest, I wouldn't.
Well,
Maybe not probably, but
that's like kind of where a team might have to get to be
oh yeah,
successful
yeah,
with an offer
yeah.
sheet.
And then if your favorite team's the one targeting the player, you're probably not super enthusiastic giving up the first and the third, plus having this somewhat big contract now on your books.
Which I'll be honest, I could see a team doing that for Cooley.
Maybe.
So yeah, there's I think a strong enough argument that you'd be okay doing like a 5 by 5.5.
That would so something like that gets pulled out. That's where things start getting interesting.
Yes.
Because again, Paterka at the top end, Marco Rossi at the top end. Team says, most likely the team says, "Thanks for negotiating this deal for me. We'll match this. The 2 first is not worth it."
Yeah.
Will Cooley doing something like that where you're pushing well into the first and third compensation, making the deal a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah. That's how you make it successful.
Yep. Are there players that you specifically would, maybe this isn't the right way to phrase it, maybe players that you would like to see an offer sheet on, or maybe any specific teams targeting them? Because I've got a couple.
Yeah. I I think I don't think anyone does it because I don't think cap wise or compensation wise it's worth it. Noah Dobson to me would be right off the so he is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights, so you have to be on that quickly. But new GM seemingly going to bring in a defenseman first overall in the draft. Little bit tight on the cap, would kind of hamper the ability to make some moves. And we've highlighted in plenty of episodes the right shot D market is thin. I think what you're probably doing for Dobson is you're probably taking the AAV and doing like a 5-year contract to do the 2 firsts, a second, and a third. You're not doing the max term because then you're getting into 4 first territory.
Yep.
But if I'm Buffalo and I'm looking for a legitimate top pair right shot defenseman, I know they don't have their second next year, so they can't in theory do this, but just using them as an example, I'm extending an offer sheet to Noah Dobson.
Would you sign Dobson to a 2-year offer sheet, which walks him to
unrestricted
free agency and set it right at 7 mil?
Sure.
So that's a first and a third for Noah Dobson, 2 years pretty much guaranteed. Do the Islanders match that though? I feel like they probably do.
I think they have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's where you use them to really kind of hurt your opponent, if you will.
Yeah.
Like if you're the Rangers, that would be a great idea.
Yeah. I would even push it a little further though. You could do a similar 2-year deal, and if you're a team that has a first, second, and third, Do 2 years at 9.3.
Yeah. 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 That now the Islanders, that starts to get a little uncomfortable if you're the Islanders.
Yeah.
But the problem is you, if you're the Islanders, you also look at it and say, this compensation isn't, the draft pick compensation coming back is not enough.
Generally, you try and figure it out.
Yeah.
Islanders are a team that like should be able to create enough space where they'd be able to match pretty much whatever the offer sheet is.
Yeah. So do I expect that to happen? Absolutely not. Is that someone that I would have some interest in doing? And is it a team that I could make at least a little uncomfortable doing so? Yes. The Islanders have a couple other RFAs, but I don't know if I'm interested enough. Maxime Siplikov, I like him as a player a lot, but I don't know if a team is going to be quite willing to go there. Trying to think if there's anyone else that Holmstrom as well, I think, for the Islanders. Like you could kind of you can't even offer all three because of the comp you would need, like, you don't have the correct. So the reason the Blues worked out so well is they offered one falling in the second round range and one offer in the third round range, and that's as close as you can get to doing kind of two duels. You could do Dobson at a first and a third, and then someone else at a second. So could do Dobson for 7, and then Siplikov for like 4.6.
Yeah.
Which that's still not super like, it's uncomfortable for the Islanders, but not.
It's not something they can't get out of.
They
or
probably
make work.
They might just say, okay, you can have Siplikov for the second and move
Right.
on. Like,
well, I guess the right way to put it is it's not like you're not putting them in a really bad spot. I guess it's
no,
they can manage losing that player.
I have two others. These are kind of hypothetical scenarios. So if one I brought up in our prep, and then the other one I'll bring up now. If Anaheim kind of goes big fish hunting in unrestricted free agency, which it seems like they kind of are interested in doing, they just also added Chris Kreider. They have a couple RFAs as well that might be interesting enough. Might be. Could you go and target a McTavish or Dostal? Dostal being tougher because he's an arbitration eligible, so you're probably going to have to do that before July 1st. But McTavish is not.
Or before July
or 5th. Sorry.
Yeah.
July 5th.
Yep.
McTavish is not, though. Could even start playing the long game here. I don't think it's this summer that Anaheim's going to be hurting cap-wise. But if they go big fish, so I got a couple ifs here. But if they go big fishing and land a Marner or an Ehlers or even Brock Besser or something, you give them a fairly substantial offer for Mason McTavish. Then next summer, they have Leo Carlson and Jackson Lacombe, both as restricted free agents. Could make things a little uncomfortable for them next offseason.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're playing almost chess here.
Cutter Gauthier too.
Yes.
Next offseason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Again, do they probably make that work? Yeah, absolutely. Like, going to cap wages, putting our using the kind of pie chart, donut chart, can toggle on our projections and everything. With our long-term projections factored into Anaheim's cap situation, they still have 15 million in cap space. So even if they go in and get Mitch Marner and spend 14 million there, they still have an extra million to work with. So you could make them a little uncomfortable with a McTavish offer sheet, but you might be pushing for what you're comfortable paying for McTavish.
Right.
Playing this out just a little bit, though. Next offseason, a lot tighter for Anaheim. Again, that might be going too many steps ahead, but
yeah,
and the NHL doesn't do that.
True.
That's not how this works, but
no one's that fun.
No. Then my other what if, talked about last episode, a lot of smoke around it. Calgary acquires JJ Peterka from Buffalo. They now have 3 pretty big RFAs needing contracts. One of them being arbitration eligible in Morgan Frost. But then you have Connor Zary and JJ Peterka if you acquire his rights but don't have an instant deal with him. Both in theory being offer sheet eligible. Again, Calgary should have enough space, but they go and spend a little bit of money and suddenly have 2 guys sitting out there. Could do Peterka at 7 and Zary at the whatever we said for Cooley, like the 5.5 to make it a second.
So if it was going to be a second in compensation, it would need to be down in the 4 or 4.6, just under 4.7.
Yeah. So like even that's really tough because of the way the pick compensation has to work. Yeah. So I don't know. Those were my 2. I won't steal your thunder on the probably most likely to happen ones, I think.
Yeah, probably. I'm going to start with a smaller one, Joel Hofer, goalie for the Blues. This is kind of one that the Blues should be able to handle. It's more a question of how much money do they want tied up in their goaltending. So the Blues have like $5 million in space. Our projection for Joel Hofer is 2 years at 2.8 AAV. That is very manageable with that $5 million. The Blues don't really have anyone else in-house that they need to pay this year. Chances are, if you want an offer sheet to be successful, you need to increase that AAV. I could see a team going up to pretty much that 4.68 if they view him as a potential even 1B. And then all of a sudden, the Blues, I think, have to start questioning, okay, we have Binnington locked in, Hofer at 4.7 just about. Now we're over 10 million for our goalies. Is that how we want to allocate our cap space? If not, maybe they end up not matching and take the second round pick. Teams that I think should be all over this, actually 5 of them: Columbus, Detroit, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and then the fun one is Edmonton. One, it's arguable they could use a switch up in net.
Arguable.
Yeah. And then 2, just a little bit of payback.
Yeah. I don't know how Edmonton's fitting that salary-wise, but I don't disagree with your assessment.
I could tell you how they fit it salary wise.
Yeah, we'll get there in 1 second. Let me add my thoughts on Hofer, and then you can kind of conclude the podcast with
Well,
the
they get
hottest.
rid of Evander Kane.
Oh, okay. Because you didn't want to shake hands.
Yeah.
Or stash him on long-term injured reserve again.
He.
Already seem to be some hot water around that. So
that's probably they could lose their second round pick, not be able to do this offer sheet.
So yeah. To me, this is a move like a Columbus or Detroit should be looking to do.
Yes.
And again, I think you're right that St. Louis probably, but a second round pick for Hofer, who's a very, very good young goalie, but still not full on known and proven, that's not a bad return.
Well, right. So I'll say that 2.8 that we have projected, they could still consider getting the second, but financially you're not impacting them at all.
Yes.
Once you go up to that 4.7, you're pretty much using up what they currently have available. So now if they want to make any other moves, you're forcing other money out. So in that sense, it makes it more complicated for them to match.
Yes. Yeah, so getting a second round pick and not paying that salary,
yes,
could make sense
for your backup goalie.
Yes. And that's where Columbus and Detroit, who are a little bit closer, I mean, obviously Edmonton's a contender. I don't disagree, but I think Edmonton just can't afford financially and almost asset-wise to do this.
Potentially.
But Columbus, Detroit, close, have playoff level aspirations, could certainly use, Columbus in particular could certainly use, I guess can't say that Hofer would provide a guaranteed steady hand, but I think a little bit more of a higher ceiling, lower floor, or higher floor, higher ceiling than almost anyone they currently have. Detroit, they could roll out Talbot and Mrazek, but adding Hofer in would not be the worst idea by any means.
Yep.
So yeah, I think one of those two could make sense. But ultimately, unless a team is willing to go to that 4.8, which Columbus has this space, maybe they're willing to do that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see a way that St. Louis doesn't match that.
Maybe.
So one name we've danced around all episode. I started very close. It's Evan Bouchard.
Yep.
In theory, should be a no-brainer offer sheet candidate. So on one hand, this will help bring everything full circle. On one hand, he's arbitration eligible. On the other, he's the player that both sides could elect to not go to arbitration for. Maybe we should. So, kind of going full circle, why would that potentially be in play here?
So, for Edmonton, if they elect, Bouchard then gets to decide the term of the arbitration. The issue with that is he could choose to walk himself to unrestricted free agency at the end of that term. Fine. You still get to keep the player right now. It's just not the greatest asset management to go that route.
He also probably would get a pretty nice arbitration award.
Yeah.
AAV wise, basically.
Yes.
Why might Bouchard not want to elect for arbitration?
Other than arbitration is not fun.
Yeah. Edmonton gets to elect the deal or select the term of the deal. So back at it again next summer, probably.
Yeah.
He also could be hurting his own negotiating power there, too. Because he should be getting an $11 million contract. He should.
Yes.
Just about. If he goes to arbitration, he's not getting anywhere near that and as an award. He will probably get a very nice award, but he's not going to get that. And it takes some of the pressure off the team to actually get something done. If they want to play hardball with him, they can just say, okay, that's fine. We'll just go to arbitration, 1-year deal. We'll come back at this next summer when we have a little bit more clarity on our cap space, on if we can stash Evander Kane on long-term injured reserve for another regular season, stuff like that. So that's why he might not want to do it, is it might hurt his negotiating leverage in this situation. And it also takes the ability for him to go and solicit an offer sheet off the table. Now, I'm not guaranteeing that happens by any means, but it's kind of trying to lay out the why it could linger into the summer, or how it could linger into the summer, and an offer sheet could still exist.
Yes. So our projection, which was 8 years, call it 10.9.
Basically 11. Not quite, but.
Right. That would calculate to about 17.4 million for offer sheet purposes, which would be 4 first-round picks.
I was going to say, for those following along at home, that's well into the 4 first-round pick range.
Now, a team could drop the term to 5 or below and pretty much stay at our projected cap hit, or I guess to be more specific, they could even go to 11.699999 and stay in the 2 first, 1 second, and 1 third compensation. I don't think that would be smart if you want it to be a successful offer sheet. I think the only way Edmonton possibly considers not matching is if it's the 4 first-round picks.
Yeah. Because then they're getting potentially enough value.
Potentially enough value, but they're also getting the most, I think, perception of getting the most value possible through offer sheet would matter to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Could always do a side type of deal too, but
right.
But yes. Yeah.
Just talking offer sheets though, strictly. So some teams that I could see spending the money to do that.
Hold on to your seats, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm going to mention 2 teams first that it would be interesting, but I don't think they do it. Buffalo.
Yeah.
Who very badly need a right shot. I don't think Bouchard is the type of defenseman that they're necessarily looking for.
And money allocation wise, that would be a lot of money tied up with 3 guys on their blue line.
Exactly.
But they also are desperately in need of a very good right shot defenseman.
and are just desperately in need of
Players. Good players.
good players to make the playoffs.
And in desperate need of maybe changing some of the perception around the organization, and doing something like this would definitely do that.
Yep. That said, not happening.
Probably not happening.
Columbus. That would be a very interesting one to me. I don't think they do it. They certainly can.
The four teams you mentioned, you listed here, I did not. I would have thought Columbus actually would have been one of the two that you would have put in the most likely.
Okay.
I don't think they. I agree. I don't think they do it, but
I don't think they do it either, but they certainly could.
Yeah.
They're near playoff contention. They have a lot of young players. They have a lot of cap space.
yep. Only I'll play devil's advocate. Only problem is they have a lot of good young players who are going to need pretty nice contracts in the next couple of years.
They can afford it all.
Oh, yes, they can, but
They could go sign Mitch Marner this offseason
Yes.
and be able to extend their core.
yeah, but it does start to get a little bit tighter there.
Yeah.
But Bouchard's probably worth it.
Yeah. Carolina.
I didn't know which one you were going to go next.
Going with the number 2 option.
See, I would have put them as the most likely here.
Interesting.
I would, yeah. I actually really like that idea for them. I really think that. Okay, I don't think Bouchard's going to get an offer sheet. I think he gets signed by Edmonton. There's a chance I had to edit out this entire segment because the extension gets done before this episode gets released. But I think Edmonton gets Bouchard done, but Carolina, man, that would, getting those extra picks, those extra firsts in the Rottenen swap makes this very palatable for them to do. They have the young assets already. They have multiple first-round picks in multiple years. I mean,
well, they have 2 firsts in 2026.
Okay.
That's it.
Oh, okay. Still, though, they have another.
They're in a spot, too, where they can afford to not have first-round picks, especially if it gets a top 5, and some people will not like that, so I'll say top 10 defenseman.
Yeah. And that's a clear area of need, too.
Clear area of need. This offseason, they have $28.4 million in cap space. They could probably do this for Bouchard and still sign a Besser or an Ehlers.
Yeah.
If they really wanted to go crazy, they could probably do him and Marner.
Yeah.
So Carolina's my number 2. The Calgary Flames are my number 1.
You want to, pun intended, stoke the fire a little bit.
I'm going to give you more than
Battle of
just
Alberta.
Bouchard here. Let's pretend they make that Paterka move that we referenced earlier.
Okay. Trade for him.
Yep.
Yep.
And if we think back to the previous episode where we actually talk about what a return could look like, it might be Rasmus Anderson. So on the right side, technically Uyghur is there. He also is very good on his offhand. You have a top of the league prospect, Zane Harek, who is considered to be very good offensively. And then in your top 4, you kind of have another opening. and I'm going to say it's on the right side. So there's the spot for Bouchard. Bouchard currently is on your division rival, which makes this way more fun, or way more of a story. Calgary has 2 first-round picks this year and next year. Now, I reference this year because even though that wouldn't be part of the compensation, they could make both of those picks and kind of stockpile the organization a little bit with prospects.
Didn't they make 3 first-round picks last year?
Sounds right.
So 5 in 2 years, and then would still have 1 more
in 2026.
next year.
Yeah. So they have just under 27 million cap space this offseason. We've mentioned Frost and Zari. Kevin Ball, defenseman, is in there too. Not a ton of money to work with if we lock all of those guys up, or maybe one of them's moved out in that deal for Paterka and you have to lock him up. Regardless, there is money to work with. You're just probably getting close to the cap. But that's fine. Then for the foreseeable future, potentially the next decade, you have an elite power play quarterback on both power play units. And you just took an elite franchise defenseman from your division rival.
Yeah.
And Calgary supposedly wants to try and make a big move.
That would be a big move. That would be a big move. That would be the most fun this offseason.
That's what I would like to see happen.
I don't think I really don't know if there's a singular more fun move. Maybe Sidney Crosby being traded or Connor McDavid.
That would be very fun.
Yes. Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby being traded. Or at least Connor McDavid maybe not going, maybe the extension taking some time. That would, I know that nothing's happening, but also that would be kind of...
Yes, it would be something.
But this would be right up there. And, I mean, is it going to happen now?
No. Should it? Yeah.
But yeah, that's the fun one to think about. So I think that's where we kind of leave the offer sheet episode. I think we dump more water on them. I think the what you laid out as like the Cooley and the Hofer scenarios, that's probably if you want your favorite team to execute, that's the line of thinking you need to be at, is where's an uncomfortable financial level. So it's either probably pushing to the top of a compensation threshold like Hofer, or pushing compensation but also starting to put a price on that the other team, the picks in return, could at least make them pause and think, could we use these picks and this quote unquote cleared cap space elsewhere to maybe make some different move? So could the Rangers go and, I mean, Paterka's the one that there's been the most smoke around, but like, could they go and get Gavrikov and I don't know a name for this offseason that could have, but I think that's when the Rangers start to be like, maybe, okay, we can get a first for Will Cooley. That's an asset we didn't expect to have. Okay, yeah, we're losing. We had allocated $3 million of cap space, so we now have $3 extra million of cap space too to work with. to go replace him with probably similar, maybe slightly better veteran player. But I think the offer sheet, it's fun to talk about right now, but it's probably something that it's going to linger because the ones that are potential are the ones who aren't arbitration eligible or decline arbitration for whatever reason and linger until most of the big unrestricted free agents are signed.
Yeah, before we started recording this one, we kind of discussed how this episode is full of what ifs. It's very hard to pinpoint where the most likely targets actually are. And once we go through July 1st, hopefully that's a big day and things don't wait too long. But once we kind of get through that first week of July, should have a much better picture of what teams are close to the cap or which teams are close to the cap, what players are still unsigned, specifically the RFAs. And at that point, there might be one, two, maybe even three that stick out as wait a minute, there could be something here.
Yeah, because right now with the cap going up and most teams having some level of expiring contracts, there's not many that we're looking over that would be like, ooh, if you came right out on July 1st with that, they might have trouble. Bouchard might be the exception.
Right. And we've still got the draft.
Yeah.
Like Edmonton could clear
7 million.
five. Yeah, I was going to say 5, 6, 7 mil.
Yeah.
Like, and then it's kind of it's not even a conversation.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's so.
it we don't like pouring water on the fire when everyone's enjoying it,
No.
but in a way, like it's also good to have realistic expectations. Um, could it happen? Sure, but it's unlikely.
Yeah, and if it does, it's going to be like, so there's two scenarios if it does happen. It's the JJ Paterka Buffalo says thanks for negotiating, we'll match this, no problem. Or it's what you laid out with Hofer, where we start pushing up salaries double what their market value is with relatively low draft pick compensation, while also maybe putting the team in some level of an uncomfortable situation, that being the amount of money on goalies.
Yep.
But that's more likely to happen, or somehow a team finds themselves close to the cap and another St. Louis kind of second and third round attack comes from on someone's RFAs.
Yeah. Or Calgary goes after Bouchard.
Or Calgary on July 1st has a pretty shiny offer sheet waiting for Evan Bouchard. Well, let's just hope Edmonton doesn't clear cap space before July 1st.
That is the hope.
Because if that happens, then we get some. If they don't have a ton of space, then I think we have to be on the lookout for it a little bit.
Yes, we like chaos. So.
We do like chaos, and we also do like you following us on X, Blue Sky, Threads at AFP Analytics. Buy me a coffee if you feel inclined to contribute to our work financially. Can contribute there and subscribe to the Max Term podcast. Listen to the Max Term podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, like to consume them. And I think maybe you'll hear one more episode from just me on taxes and the business side of things leading into the draft and free agency. But besides that, I think this is the last time you hear from us before the chaos of July 1st. Appreciate you listening, and we'll talk to you after free agency is kind of settled.